Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West. Here to give you the top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Now, as usual, I give you the top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it first, followed by a movie clip, a skit, a trailer, or something that's going on in the community, or maybe some pictures. And then I'll give you the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories that made it, folks. So let's waste no time. Oh, yeah. Let's get to it. Story number 1. Canfield takes some time to notice state champs. A little community of Canfield. If you did not know, Canfield High School girls softball team won the state championship. The team went 27-3 and beat the Bryan Golden Bears for the state Division II championship. They won 4-0. Canfield took the time to honor the team. Let's make this a top story. Anytime you make it a state around here, big headline. Story number 2. OSHA has been busy. Safety remains a top concern. This is after the death of a worker who had more than 2,000 degrees of molten steel poured on him that, according to the report, could have been prevented. So he's no longer with us. Now, this is a story out of Hubbard by Chris McBride. The report goes on to explain how the investigation found 11 serious violations at the company plant, amounting to a proposed $145,184 in penalties. Now, safety has been in recent headlines due to the deaths of employees, workers, and on top of that, even road crews. That's why story number 2 made it this week. Story number 3, the speed camera debate. Speed cameras are proven to bring in revenue, money. So it appears that a lot of police departments are taking notice and deciding to use them. Both Trumbull and Mahoning County are now using speed cameras in what they say is to enforce safety. Oh, really? According to USA Today, Ohio police issued 8,900 speeding tickets in only 5 months during December of 2023, generating at least $1.3 million in fines. That's why story number 3 made it this week. Story number 4. Who's in the running for Ruley's vacant Senate seat? It appears that 5 candidates have applied so far for the Democratic Party's appointment on the November 5th ballot to replace Michael Ruley for the 33rd Ohio Senate District seat. Now, each of these candidates will face off against Al Catrona of Canfield, who was appointed Wednesday. Now, this is all according to an article published June 27th by David Skolnick. Now, the 5 candidates are Julius Oliver, Pat Kelly, Martin Hume, all of Youngstown, Jess Kennard of East Palestine, and David Mosier of Boardman are all running for Ruley's seat. That's why story number 4 made it this week. Story number 5. Another sad story out of Youngstown. Ed Runyon has a headline explaining how a woman's body was found in a store parking lot on Mahoning Avenue. Now, what got this story in is the fact that this has happened on several occasions and it stayed consistent in the headline. Just last year, several bodies were found on Market Streets, even in Boardman. So this has been happening quite a bit. That's why story number 5 made it this week. Story number 6, infrastructure money. If you did not know, the Biden administration announced $454 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law funding, which includes over $56,000 specific projects, not dollars, and awards across over 4,500 communities in all 50 states, according to whitehouse.gov. Now, to this date, $3.8 billion has been announced in Ohio for roads, bridges, roadways, safety, and other major projects. Ohio received $630.7 million. Now, this story made it in. If you didn't know, that's the money they received. Ohio, this is big. That's big money for road crews. Now, this story made it in due to the consistent stories in circulation out of Youngstown about the pros and cons resulting from their downtown improvement efforts. Especially when we talk about the roads and the underground, all that other stuff. Now, at the moment, planning, business loss, and safety is what got the story in. Business have been losing money, and there's traffic. Sometimes it slows up, sometimes it slows down. But when you have major disasters, it slows down. Folks, this story is still developing. That's story number 6. I'll make it to the top 2 this week. Big headline. Story number 7 and the top 2 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. Folks, some people move away. Some people run off to safety. In other states thinking they have it. They're going to have a big dream of landing a big job, and they're going to open up a business and make tons of money. In other states, some people run because of crime and safety. They think they're going to get the same satisfaction in other states. What I've learned by when I moved back here is that really some things are different, but there are a lot of things that I do like about the local community, and a lot of people don't take for granted. And right now, I think what this area probably is working on is the people, getting the people to be a little bit more hospitable, compassionate, have empathy, and on top of that, work together. But when you don't have good people, it can really bring a sour taste, even if you have everything to offer. So let's get to this top story. Story number 7. More attention on whether progress is being made downtown. Speaking of good people. Now, the timeline is critical because each day, money and confidence in the city is being lost. According to a Mediator report by David Skolnick, the Realty Tower is expected to be demolished by August 2nd to allow the nearby international towers and standby buildings and all those buildings downtown to reopen. Now, this story is still developing. Let's make it story number 7. Also made to the top this week because everybody's waiting to see what happens downtown. Big headline. Things are getting postponed and delayed. People are trying to go on with business as usual. Big headline. Story number 8 and the top local headline and developing news story that made it this week for you. Keep you informed. People always wonder when you go into a city, you may see, on the city emblem, welcome sign, you may see symbols of organizations that are within the city, and people wonder why you don't usually see gang symbols. If you do see gang symbols, some people usually go the other way because they're either graffitied on the building or graffitied on something. But that's probably why a lot of people are straying away from trying to get people to stop the violence, because people are violent in this up here in Ohio. And violence brings on death, and death is not good. So there's a culture that people are trying to fight. Well, let's get to this top story because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be peaceful. And one of my customers, a good friend of mine, came into the store and said, "Brian, if you do your show this week, just tell them to stop the violence." Story number 8. The levy solution is in the headlines. Mormon and Austintown have continued to make headlines for what appears to be a leaning on a tax levy solution to meet budget goals. Now, according to an article published July 1st, Austintown is looking to a levy to meet police budget goals, and Mormon is looking to a levy to help meet emergency budget goals as well. Now, according to the article, budgets are well in the $1 million range. If you did not know, the article goes on to explain how the money will be itemized to account for these budget goals. Folks, this story is still developing. Let's make it a top story because everybody is trying to meet budget goals, and they think that taxes, even property taxes, may go up. All that, well, probably have already gone up, but this is a big concern locally because you're going to tax out the little population that has been here. Let's try to get people to stay. That's why Story Rate made to the top this week. Well, folks, there are top 8 local headlines and developing news stories that made it this week. I'll be right back with the top 8 international headlines and developing news stories. So don't you go anywhere. You're the Mediator with me, Brian West. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 8 international headlines and developing news story that made this week. This week, I have to focus on being a doctor. Well, usually whenever I go see my doctor, I usually ask her how she's doing. She always says, "Hey, Brian, how you doing?" Sometimes I guess they gotta ask this question now, like, "Do you like women or do you like men?" Oh Lord, I like women. I don't know if I could be a doctor nowadays because there's so much going on, so much mental health problems, and I just found a man. I think the police officers found him running around the city butt naked. And he told the police officers that the black man was God. Whew. You know, there's some facts in there, because if you go back to ancient Kemet, you know, black folks were actually, you know, they did consider themselves gods. So maybe that's what he was talking about. But for some odd reason, this brother decided he wanted to go out and get butt naked and prove his point. And when I heard the story, all I thought about was the Garden of Eden, you know. Because back then they didn't have police, you know, they was just butt naked. So God would pop up and say, "What's going on? You know, what y'all doing here? Y'all getting loose? Y'all getting loose? I smelled some of the Medusa going on in here." Now, the police officers then later took him, and I think he went to court and everything. So, you know, you got to think about, everybody's talking about mental health and all these mental problems. And sometimes when you talk to mental patients, they'll say things that are logical. I used to be a mental patient, so I know what's going on. You know, I used to talk to them. They talk about demons running through and everything. So, and you got teenagers now, and they, like I said, they watching all these, they got all this stuff on TV. And, you know, when you're a teenager, you think that you want to be famous and you want a lot of attention. The hormones are raging. You're probably looking at nudity on TV and you want to act out these thoughts. And you get cravings to be famous and be noticed. So you do anything. Come outside butt naked if you have to, just to get some attention. I mean, this one teenager shot her boyfriend on YouTube just to get views. So, you know, they talk about ADD. I think everybody's got a little taste of it. Even a doctor. I talk to my doctor sometimes. I say, "How you doing? You all right?" I say, "Yeah. You know, Brian, there's a lot of unhealthy people." One of my doctors, I think she even quit. She left. She got frustrated. Her job was wearing her down. She got tired of hearing people's problems. So this week, I want to give a shout out to the doctors. And I even made a song about it. Doctors need love just like you. 'Cause when the pharmacy closed down, the drugs that keep you alive will be through. So give your doctor every chance that you can. Something new. Woo! Let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 1. The public school story. Teachers need love too. The Atlantic has an article explaining how rural Republicans are fighting to save their public schools. The article's main talking point is school choice and how it has evolved over the years. Now, there is money involved in this report, which goes on to explain what school choice has done to many public schools and what the cost of sending a kid to private schools is. Now, some key arguments that make this report a good read is the fact that many parents don't see a difference when it comes to the quality of education being received by either or. That means private or public schools. Now, what got this story in is how each entity is funded and what private schools are taking away from taxpayer public schools. That means students and money. Now, the article even explains how some private schools have adopted voucher programs with middle and working class families to help them pay. That's how they're doing it, even with scholarships. That's why story number 1 made it this week. Story number 2, the safety for children at the border. CNN has a headline explaining how a judge has partially terminated a decades-old agreement that oversees conditions for migrant children in federal custody. The piece goes on to explain how U.S. District Judge Dolly M. G's ruling terminates the agreement with the exception of the 1997 Flores Settlement Agreement, which set the standard for the humane treatment of children in U.S. custody. Now, it appears that the court has agreed with the Biden administration that a new HHS regulation will provide appropriate oversight and multiple safety guards to account for the lack of state licensing in places like Texas and Florida. Now, Lucia Welch, counsel for the plaintiff and deputy legal director of children's rights, explains how there is deep disappointment in the court's ruling. She goes on to say how there is now concerns for thousands of children who are in harm's way. The Biden administration has stated otherwise. That means that they don't They don't think that they think that their new way is helpful. Now, thus making this a top story. That's why story number 2 made in this week. Story number 3: healthcare concerns in Gaza in the headlines. Folks, this is getting out of hand over there. Now, before the airing of this show, the Washington Post has a headline explaining how Gaza's remaining hospitals will stop working in 2 days after the article was published on June 30th due to the fact that the fuel used to operate generators could run out. So before the airing of this show, there was some stuff going down in Gaza, more saga, and that means that there could be a lot more people hurt without the generators and the medicines and all that stuff. Now, the entire report explains the saga that is unfolding in the region and how Israel has made hospitals a key target in their military campaign, claiming that Hamas used them for military activity. Folks, this story is standing alive, highlighting a war-weary Gaza Strip. That's why story number 3 made it this week. Story number 4: summer food benefits on the radar. USA Today has a headline explaining how dozens of Republican-led states are rejecting summer food benefits for hungry families. Now, the article highlights a number of programs that have been put in place to assist and aid families in need. Now, when reading the report, the piece succeeds at putting readers in the minds of struggling families trying to feed their children. It appears that governors of a dozen states, including Alabama, Alaska, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming, all opted out of the summer EBT program, which grants $120 per eligible child to be used during the summer months, leaving about 9.5 million students without the aid this summer, according to the U.S. State Department of Agriculture. Now, only Arkansas and Louisiana accepted the EBT programs. Folks, this is at a time when hunger and child neglect has stayed in top headlines. Well, folks, those are our top 4 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week. I'll be right back with the top 4. So don't you go anywhere. You're the Mediator, me, Brian West. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Now it's time to get to the top 4 international headlines and developing news story that made this week. You know, I was thinking about science and how science has changed everything. And, you know, it made me think, you know, did they kill a lot of people back in the day for no reason, or did they make a mistake? Because scientifically, a lot of people today would be dead back in the day if they would have done the things that they did today. You know, you had people who had made big discoveries and they got hung upside down, tortured, crucified, and today they'd be living amongst us. So now scientists have been discovering and playing with just about everything you could think of. And this wouldn't have happened a long time ago. They either put them in a mental institution or, you know, could you imagine people coming together, talking about smashing atoms underneath the earth? Some of them religious scholars were like, boy, you are crazy. Go home, get married, have some children, and do it the normal way. And don't catch no STDs. But now things have changed. You know, they got biological weapons, COVID-19. Things have changed drastically. And a lot of people are not going to church and they're doing things scientifically. They have a new robot out called Sophia that can have a conversation with a human being. Back in the day, that would have never been thought of. Science has evolved. People are having relationships with themselves and pleasuring themselves because of science. So you got to think, where are we headed? Could they figure out how to keep people alive? There could be no death. That's not going to happen. They are genetically modifying people's genes. That's how big science is, folks. If I go home and find me a woman and she ends up being a robot and I die, science may get the insurance money. How does that work? Makes you think. scientifically, they're taking all the jobs. People have to sit at home and relate and rely on science. We're living in a different age, folks. You could be wired in your brain, scientifically messed up on purpose. Let's waste no time, folks. Let's get to these top 8. Because your health right now is dependent on science. Let's get to it, folks. Let's get to it. Story number 5. Speaking of health, healthcare and the Supreme Court. Healthcare and science. The Washington Post has a report explaining how the recent Supreme Court decisions to curb the power of federal agencies will hobble government efforts to protect public health. Now, this is what legal experts are warning. Now, according to the report, the ruling will make it harder for some federal agencies to bring enforcement actions. This gives the judges more leeway to second guess agency decisions, and on top of that, following a decision Monday this past week, they're saying that it will make it easier to challenge long settled regulations. Now, this all falls out as I go along. Now, the report explains complications with regulating drugs, tobacco products, and even cutting edge medical technologies, all as a factor. So this is all the report. Now, the problem of how long it will take to untangle all of this is what got the story in, and what it will do to public health. So that means there's a lot of legal stuff going on in this public health system when it comes to regulating drugs and all that other stuff, folks. This story is still developing. We're talking about science and medicine. Big health. Story number 6, the U.S. and Saudi headline. Money Week has a report explaining how the U.S. and Saudi deal has expired. It goes on to say that the U.S. is in decline. How sad is that? Now, the deal that was expired, the deal that was made and will expire. It was made. I gotta slip on my words here. Let me get this right. It was made in the 1970s by Wall Street bond dealer and extraordinaire William Simon, the article says. That's according to the article. Now, he solved 2 problems at once with this deal. Now, the U.S. needed to export dollars and the Saudis needed to export oil. Now, here's the catch. The agreement said that if you wanted Saudi oil, you'd have to pay in dollars. Then the Saudis could exchange from the U.S. Treasury bonds and provide security to the Saudi government, each of which the founding fathers were against, the founding fathers of this nation. Now, it appears that the deal was kept secret, which you did not know. Now, what got the story in is the fact that this went on for 40 years under the radar, but the deal expired June 9th of this year. Now, at the moment, no one knows how this will affect the United States, but the national debt was mentioned as a factor in this report, and neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden has vowed to cut spending. That's why story number 6 also made to the top 2 this week. Big headline. Story number 7 and the top 2 international headlines and developing news stories that made this week extra. Read all about it. Get informed. Find something new. Get enlightened. Use your brain, your light bulb. Story number 7. Work ethics. Work ethic remains in top headlines. Can we work? Do we want to work? CNBC has a headline focusing on how many young Americans don't seem to be working as hard as the older folks. The report points out how unemployment is only 4%, but a growing number of young adults are not working. The article calls them the unemployables and how they're struggling to find employment despite their best efforts. Now, there are some realities in this story. You have the fact that a lot of young Americans have some very bad habits. Some people are just sitting out purposely. Now, here is a key stat in the report among those 16 to 24 years of age, and that is the fact that unemployment rose to 9% in May within that age group. Now, the article also highlights the skill factor and how many young adults in the U.S. are neither working nor learning new skills. This story has been the talk of in a lot of circles for some time and could remain a top headline if it keeps up. So story number 7 also made to the top this week. Big headline. Story number 8 at the top. International headline and developing news story that made this week. Yes, my birthday is this week. I'm getting older, as my mom would say. So I can't help but spend my birthday with you. So cheers to me for my 42 years on this planet. I pray for many, many more. And I couldn't be having more of a good time than telling you a story and getting you ready for your day on Sunday morning. Story number 8. Is a labor shortage coming? I like to work. I'm working on my birthday, even voluntarily. I don't get paid, but I do my duty. Story number 8. Here we go. The Atlantic has a headline explaining how a coming labor shortage is not good news. COVID was mentioned as a factor because the original plan was that the government should do much more to prevent long-term unemployment. Now, this plan was carried out, if you did not know, thus saving the economy. So they executed it and saved the economy. But there's a but. There are few aces in the hole when looking at this report, and that is the American advantage when it comes to getting cheap labor. So that means that when they're trying to get cheap labor, they're facing some obstacles. The key to this report will be how low will American workers go, or foreign workers go. So there'll be a competition on who's going to be picking fruit on the farms. That means that everybody's looking for good workers who will be willing to do the dirty work. And when it comes to the pay, low pay, and the fact that you could have labor unions who will play a factor in regulating these wages if it comes to this point. So that means they might be starting to cut everything off just to get people to go to work. Story number 8 is a big factor because if it is predicting a labor shortage, that means that they'll be recruiting laborers. Big headline. Well, folks, those are our top 8 local and international headlines and developing news stories that I made this week. I hope you got something out of today's program. I always get something out of the research. As usual, I like to thank all the news outlets, the journalists, the people on the front lines. You deserve all the credit. I'm just a mediator, the man in the middle, navigating your stories just to keep people informed. If you want to show some support here at Method 8, it does not take much. All you have to do is visit the website on the screen, buy something, click on something, watch something, read something, or just sponsor a program. Or you can stop at the store at 5648 Market Street in Boardman, Ohio, and see my smiling face. Well, folks, I am out of here. I'll be back next week looking through over 200 or more stories just to keep you informed. Thank you for tuning to the Mediator this week with me, Brian West. Peace.
Have no fear, fellow citizens. The Mediator is here.